peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for continuing to being with us since morning. Earlier on, we were looking at the news-making headlines in Kenya, and we looked at the leading newspapers here in the country. But right now, I want us to turn our attention to the rest of the continent and look at what else is making headlines in other countries here in Africa. Good afternoon to you. My name is Miriam Ogotu, and thank you so much for joining us. And this is Diaspora Dispatches. And before we get into the news, a few figures here I read in the morning, perhaps for the interest of our viewers who are joining us from other parts of Africa and the world. You might want to know where your country stands this morning. So I'll go through a few African countries and see where we stand in regards to the statistics of COVID-19 in the continent. And I'll start with Kenya. The cases there, as I said there earlier, stands at 2,216. The death toll in the country is 74. Recoveries right now stands at 553. And then we go to Uganda, where confirmed cases is 507, recoveries is 82. Zambia, confirmed cases is 1,089. The death toll there is 7, recoveries is 912. And Zimbabwe, the cases have gone up to 222. The death toll is 4, recoveries is 29. South Sudan, the cases right now stands at 1,317. 14 people have died. Recoveries there is 6. Sudan, 5,499 confirmed cases. 314 people have died. Recoveries is 1,711. Ethiopia, confirmed cases is 1,486. The death toll is 17. Recoveries is 246. And Madagascar, right now the cases have gone up to 908. The death toll is 6, and recoveries is 195. Somalia, the cases is 2,146. 79 people have died. Recoveries is 406. Congo Brazzaville, confirmed cases is 611. The death toll is 20, recoveries is at 179. The DRC, confirmed cases is 3,495. 75 people have died. The recoveries is 492. Guinea, confirmed cases is 3,933. 23 people have died. Recovery stands at 2,332 and 32. And Rwanda, the cases right now is at 397. 2 people have passed away. Recoveries is 271. South Africa continues to lead the country this continent in terms of the number of infections there. 37,525. 792 people have died, and recoveries there is 19,682. Egypt, the cases is at 28,615. The death toll is 1,088, and I must reiterate there that Egypt leads in the continent in the number of dead people. Recoveries is 7,350, and Burundi, their confirmed cases is 63. 1 person has died and 33 others have recovered. And Nigeria, confirmed cases is 11,166. The death toll there is 315. Recoveries is 3,329. And in Ghana, the cases is at 8,548. The death toll there is 38. Recoveries is 3,132. Algeria, confirmed cases is 9,733. The death toll is 673. Recoveries is 6,218. And Tunisia, the confirmed cases there is 1,087. The death toll there is 49. Recoveries is 966. Remember when the outbreak of coronavirus started, especially in the countries there in the northern part of Africa, a lot of them had registered higher numbers compared to the rest of the continent outside of South Africa in the southern part, and Tunisia was one of them. But there's something that Tunisia did that was right, because they were able to arrest the spread of the COVID-19 in that country. And when you look at the statistics right now, they recorded 1,087 cases, and out of that, they've only lost 49 people. And the recoveries there, I think, is quite impressive at 965. So when you look at 965 with the total number of confirmed cases in the country at 1,087, they've done quite well. And, I said there when they started recording their first cases, the numbers went up. But now there's something that Tunisia did that was quite good. And of course, one of them was they were very quick to introduce the curfew and the restrictions there. And we see this might have served very well the country, even as the numbers there, have not gone up. When you compare to the rest of the countries there in the northern part of Africa, Egypt, Algeria, and those other countries up there. And so there's something that Tunisia did that perhaps next time we can look at the situation there and see how much can we borrow from the situation there in Tunisia. So very commendable in the manner in which the government there has dealt with the cases there of COVID-19. And we go to Botswana, where the cases right now is at 40. One person has died. Recoveries is at 23. And the total number of cases confirmed in Africa as per, an hour ago, is at 162,695. The number of deaths that have been reported in the continent is about 4,605. Recoveries is 70,389. So we are still having low numbers, but not quite, because we see the numbers raising every day, especially in particular countries here in the continent. Thank you so much. And if there's something else you need me to know out there, if I've not mentioned your country, of which I've not mentioned a lot of African countries, please update me on the current situation and the current figures from where you're watching me from. I would really, really appreciate that. So thank you so much. That is just a few statistics from some countries here in Africa. And so right now, Mohammed Abdi Galoon, you're saying when open borders for Kenya. I think you're wondering when the borders will be open for Kenya. I think after the situation has been brought under control, and the government of Kenya is looking, of course, to lift some of the restrictions. We don't know which ones will be lifted. The government, President Uhuru Kenyatta was speaking to the nation recently. He hinted into for a possible opening up of the Kenyan economy, a possibility of lifting up of some of these restrictions. But I think that will depend on a number of factors, and there's still, we're hoping President Kenyatta will speak to the nation soon so that we can have a way forward. So in case you're wondering, I don't know which border you are referring to. Is there a particular border, Mohammed Abdi, that you're wondering when Kenya will open? Which border? You can tell me, and then, we can talk about it. John Clark and the rest of you, thank you so much for joining. So now let's talk Africa, and we go to South Africa. And South Africa's Western Cape province has amended its testing policy to focus on those aged 55 years and above. The province, known for the port city of Cape Town, has the highest number of coronavirus cases in the country. Its health department said the elderly were more at risk of becoming seriously ill. Testing will also focus on testing healthcare workers, it said. Western Cape Premier Alan Wind said the decision was made because the province had a backlog of 27,000 samples. That is no joke. We move to Libya, where reports from Libya says that the forces loyal to the internationally recognized government have recaptured Tripoli airport from the forces of its rival General Khalifa Haftar. The international airport has long been out of use, but analysts say it is a significant victory for the government. It comes as a new round of diplomacy over the conflict has started, with leaders from both factions traveling abroad for talks. Top officials from the government have been in Russia, which has been supporting General Haftar. He is reported to have traveled to Egypt. His forces have been accused of using landmines and booby traps in recent battles. We move to Nigeria, where Nigeria's aviation authority has announced plans to reopen 5 airports across the country for domestic flights only as restrictions are eased. The airports will be reopened on the 21st of June. The 5 are located in the capital Abuja, the commercial hub Lagos, and the southern city of Port Harcourt, the northern Kano State, and southeastern Imo State. Now, Musa Nuhu, the head of the aviation authority, said other airports will be gradually added to the network after a review and assessment. Flights repatriating Nigerians from abroad and humanitarian flights are allowed to operate, but under strict protocols. We go to Zambia, where a Zambian gospel artist has apologized to President Edgar Lungu for criticizing him in an online video, therefore beating an ultimatum set by the government minister that he does so within 24 hours. Kings Malembe had cautioned the government questioned the governments against locking out Zambians from investing in newly discovered gold deposits. He warned President Lungu that if only foreigners invested, he would lose votes in the next year's elections. King said in an online video that he was sorry and that he did not use the right platform to address the president. Really? And we move to Cameroon, where journalist unions in Cameroon have condemned the death of their colleague Samuel Ajieka Abue, popularly known as Wazizi. The broadcaster died on Tuesday at the Yaoundé Military Hospital, having been held incommunicado for 300 days. Reports say he was tortured before he died. The Cameroonian military have not responded to the BBC's request for comment. Now, Wazizi was arrested in August last year in Bouer, in the southwest region, on charges of complicity with the separatist fighters in the troubled Anglophone regions of Cameroon. And we go to Sudan, where Sudanese protesters have been demonstrating in the capital Khartoum. They did that yesterday, I think also today, demanding justice for dozens of opposition supporters massacred outside army headquarters a year ago. Demonstrators carried posters of the dead and burnt tires. The Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok promised that justice will be done, but rights groups say there has been little progress in the investigations. Activists say nearly 130 protesters were killed by a paramilitary force when it cleared their camp. The protesters were demanding a swift transition to civilian rule following the ousting of President Omar al-Bashir, who held on to power for nearly about 30 years. And still staying with Sudan, the United Nations Security Council on Wednesday unanimously adopted 2 resolutions to create a mission in Sudan to support the country's political transition and extend the mandate of the peacekeepers in Darfur. Diplomats have said the resolution on the new United Nations Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan, UNITAMS, was drafted by Britain and Germany. The mission was established for an initial period of 12 months, according to the text of the resolution, as seen by the AFP News. And now the resolution asks Secretary General Antonio Guterres to quickly name an envoy to head up the new mission, on top of the mission that is already there. And we go to, the Kabuga story, and the latest is a court in the French capital, Paris, has approved the extradition of the Rwandan genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga to a United Nations International Tribunal in The Hague. The 84-year-old businessman was arrested last month in the suburb of Paris after 26 years on the run. He is alleged to have backed and armed ethnic Hutu militias who slaughtered about 800,000 people in 1994. In 1997, he was indicted by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda on the 7 counts, including with genocide and crimes against humanity. The UN tribunal wound up its operations in 2015, and its duties were transferred to another UN body, the International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals, that handles outstanding war crimes cases and is pressing for Mr. Kabuga's extradition. Mr. Kabuga has called the charges against him lies. And we go to Lesotho, where the wife of former Lesotho Prime Minister Thomas Tambane, who was charged with the murder of her husband's first wife, returned to prison on Wednesday after the court annulled her judicial review, an AFP journalists have said. Masaya Tambane, 43, was charged in February for her involvement in the 2017 murder of Lipolelo Tambane, the first wife of former head of government, Thomas Tambane. In 2017, he was the PM for 2017 to 2020. Remember, he resigned about last month, and he had said he will not resign, but he had to resign. A few weeks after the crime, she had married Thomas Tambane. Now, last week, the Lesotho Court of Appeal overturned the controversial judicial review measures she had enjoyed. Judge Tamai told her she will remain in prison and will be reconvened on the 16th of June 2020. A very complicated and messy situation there for now the former Prime Minister of Lesotho. And we go to South Sudan, where the Minister of Interior has appealed to the relatives of those who died in Wednesday's Sherikat shooting to remain calm as the government investigates the matter. On Wednesday morning, an army officer related to President Salva Kiir and his bodyguards reportedly opened fire on unarmed civilians after a quarrel over land, killing 5 people. Now, according to eyewitnesses, Colonel Wal Akok wanted to clear a burial ground there in order to develop it, causing the disagreement. The shooting triggered protests, with demonstrators blocking roads and singing, "Kiir must go." All right, then. This is like throwing, adding fuel to a very lit fire already there in South Sudan. And to make it worse, it is a relative of President Salva Kiir. And we go to Tanzania, where the United States Embassy in Dar es Salaam has issued a health alert over the lack of transparency of government over the handling of COVID-19 crisis. The embassy's statement comes a week after the ambassador was summoned by the foreign ministry over an earlier statement. The statement of June 2nd, 2020 said the risk of contracting the virus remained high. It bemoaned how government has yet to release updates figures since April 29th and said a number of airlines had begun booking for flights out of the country. Airspace was opened recently, as well as universities and high schools. Sporting events are also allowed to take place. So what is happening in Tanzania is that a number of airlines had begun bookings for flights out of the country. Okay, so are people leaving Tanzania, or are people coming into Tanzania? Because President Magufuli there had said things are okay and tourism will start booming very soon. And Mr. Magufuli's government, the last time they released any figures for COVID-19 cases in the country was on the 29th of April. And they still stand at 507 cases. But they've been coming out, and a lot of government officials have been coming out saying, the situation in Tanzania is under control. The cases are now very few. I was wondering from what records are they saying the cases are few? They're saying in Dar es Salaam only about 3 cases are still remaining, and yet they cannot release, the data to tell us how far the country is. And so they've been very opaque with the information in regards to the COVID-19 situation in Tanzania. And President Magufuli has even been accused by World Health Organization of not cooperating because it is important. Everybody's releasing their data. Kenya does every day. Uganda does every day. The numbers there have gone up very high. We've not seen President Museveni trying to say this is how much we have, or to curtail the releasing of the official data there in Uganda or in other places there across Africa and across the world. So President Magufuli has been very adamant in being transparent in regards to the COVID-19 crisis in the country. And we've seen this is not the first time that the U.S. Embassy there in Tanzania has come out to give out conflicting reports. They've come out and said, the situation is dire. The hospitals in Tanzania are overwhelmed, and we saw that got the embassy in trouble there with our Tanzanian authorities, and they were even asked to apologize or something, but of course they didn't. So now the ambassador there is coming out and saying, there is an imminent problem. There is a serious health issue there in Tanzania in regards to the COVID-19, and because of the lack of transparency by the government of Tanzania, and now the embassy is saying there is a looming health crisis there in Tanzania, and it's very interesting there. But President Pombe Magufuli is saying, we're doing just fine, and we're expecting more tourists to come. I don't know he expects tourists to come from which country. Those ones that have been really working hard to curb the spread of COVID-19, and they've seen a lot of people die there. Do you think they will come to Tanzania when you've not been very transparent with the figures there, with how the government is handling the situation in Tanzania? President Pombe Magufuli must be living in an alternative universe, because if he was present here on Earth, then he would know that COVID-19 is a very serious thing. It's claiming a lot of lives across the globe, and so I don't know why he feels ashamed to give us the real situation there in Tanzania. I don't know what is the shame in it. COVID-19 does not have its genesis from Tanzania. We are all suffering. We've all been caught up in this problem, all of us. We are suffering from something that is not our own making. So I don't know what is the shame and the stigma that President Pombe Magufuli is feeling if he became transparent about the COVID-19 situation in Tanzania, what that will do to that country. I don't understand why the lack of transparency there. And it's very interesting because he's come out and criticized even the testing kits, the reagents, the laboratories there in Tanzania, and all of that. He's fired the head of, the testing, people responsible for the testing there in Tanzania. He's fired, I think, even the deputy health minister there. I think the deputy health minister must have told him, perhaps, might have criticized him in the manner in which he's handling the coronavirus cases in the country. And so the guy was fired a couple of weeks ago. And we've not heard any more, updates on the situation in regards to the coronavirus cases there in Tanzania. So that is a worry, for the outside world, the people who are planning to visit, Tanzania soon. The U.S. Embassy is telling you perhaps you might want to hold your horses because the situation here is dire, and a health crisis is looming there because the government is not transparent, and so don't bank on anything that the government of Tanzania is saying in regards to the COVID-19 situation in the country. And we go back to South Sudan, where on Tuesday the country confirmed an additional 186 coronavirus cases, bringing the tally to 1,317. The Ministry of Health has confirmed. It also reported 4 deaths between Monday and Tuesday. Now, speaking on state-run TV SSBC on Tuesday night in Juba, Dr. Richard Lako, the incident manager at the ministry, said, "We have the incident manager." Like we have an incident manager at a ministry, like that is a department, an incident manager. All right. So Dr. Richard Lako, the incident manager at the ministry, said on Monday that the public health laboratory issued 382 results. Out of these 104 were positive, 278 turned out negative, and the laboratory released another 218 results, out of which 82 were positive, 136 tested negative. Meanwhile, the chairman of the National Task Force on COVID-19, Hussein Abdelgaji Ayi, has formed a 15-member medical advisory panel headed by a representative from Health Ministry. So the numbers there in Tanzania, not in Tanzania. Tanzania, they're not transparent. Let's leave them alone. But in South Sudan, the numbers there, I think, are quite worrying, owing to how fast, the cases there are rising. I remember when Kenya, we started the first case. After the first case, I think we had 2 more, 3 more. It was gradual. It was not as radical as you see now in South Sudan. I think that is the cause for alarm, because the first case was just tested a few weeks ago, and now we see the numbers there as we speak right now is at 1,317, and they've not given us the latest, so there's a possibility that the numbers there have gone up as we speak. So I think that is a cause for concern there in South Sudan. And we end with some information from Nigeria touching on Biafra. And the leadership of the indigenous people of Biafra on Tuesday said the wickedness and stinginess of Igbo leaders would not deter it and its believers from actualizing the sovereign state of Biafra. Now, the separatist group also said all Biafrans in the United States of America contributed $2,300 US into its defense fund. The leader of the group, Nnamdi Kanu, was reported to have said this in a statement by Igbo's Director of Media and Publicity, Emma Powerful. The leader of the secessionist group was reacting against the backdrop of an allegation that his team embezzled the money contributed into the fund by various countries and individuals across the world. Kanu stated that the total amount contributed by Biafrans globally was at 143,000 US dollars, which he said is less than what I spend every single month to run IPOB worldwide. That is what Nnamdi Kanu said. He said also that all Biafrans in the United States only managed to contribute less than $2,300. It means the total amount contributed by Biafrans in the United States less than the price of one-way flight ticket from Enugu to Tokyo there. All right, so wrangles there in Biafra. So if you're wrangling like this and you don't have a unity of purpose, that will defeat all the efforts that some of you have been making in terms of actualizing your dream there. But that is the latest there. From Nigeria. So thank you so much. So let's just look at some of this information that we have gone through here. So we started with South Africa, and let me know what you think in some of these news items that we just read. And of course, the figures from South Africa are worrying. They keep going up every single day. And it appears as though the health sector there is overwhelmed by the number of people now that are getting tested. And as you speak right now, the Western Cape province, which is the place that is leading in terms of the number of confirmed cases, has right now a 27,000 number of backlog samples that have not been tested, the results have not been released because of the sector there is overwhelmed. And so right now what they're saying is they will just focus on testing people who are 55 years and above. And so the rest of you all, you can continue taking care of yourselves and observing the social distancing measures and making sure you're wearing your mask and all that, because all of you cannot be tested at the same time. The system there is overwhelmed, and the huge backlog is now even causing, another danger of having people spread this virus, because if 27,000 people have been tested and they've not received back, the test results, they'll just go by. And because if you've not received, some people will not be careful until they receive their results back. So this poses another danger there in South Africa. And I remember reading here just a couple of days ago a few lessons that another writer called, I think Andrew Harding, wrote on the BBC there. And he said the lessons that perhaps the rest of Africa can learn and borrow from South Africa in regards to dealing with the situation of COVID-19. And one of the things there that he mentioned, the challenges that South Africa now is facing, is the number of time it takes to release the results. And now, seeing that at one place only in the Western Cape, they have 27,000 samples, a backlog of 27,000 samples. That is just in one area. You can imagine the rest of, the provinces there in South Africa. So this is a very serious situation. And he said, because of this backlog and because of the slow rate at which the results are being released, that also now has contributed to the high numbers of the confirmed cases there in South Africa. So because of that, now the government there is saying we are only going to test people who are 55 years and above, because we cannot afford, the system cannot afford anymore to test everybody who comes here for testing, because they are overwhelmed and they are understaffed and they're just running out of even the testing kits. And now this is just posing other challenges that the government of South Africa had not really planned or gotten itself ready for. So we're just praying there for South Africans, even as the rest of the continent and indeed the rest of the world continues to battle with the COVID-19. And as we mentioned there earlier, South Africa figures, let me just look for them and see where they stand this morning. Right now, South Africa is at 37,525 cases as you speak, and I'm sure these figures have since changed. And the death toll there in South Africa is 792, and recoveries is 19,682. So we see there are very high numbers, 37,000 people confirmed to have had a COVID-19, and recoveries there is only 19,000. So a few number of active cases there from South Africa. So you would understand. I wish I would get to know how many people perhaps have been hospitalized, because a lot, I want to believe, are asymptomatic. And they said people have been thinking that the high rate of HIV there in South Africa could be the contributing factor, because it has been discovered, or it has been established, that people with underlying health conditions are more susceptible to this, because already their immunity is compromised. But also that writer, when I was reading, it said also South Africa has a huge number of obesity that comes with high blood pressure, hypertension, and also what did they say, heart related complications. So that also now acts as one of the riders as to why the cases there in South Africa is quite high. But yes, the numbers there are not something to smile about. And the health system in South Africa, which has one of the best systems, healthcare systems in the world, is right now currently very much overwhelmed. And the testing there, there's a huge backlog, and we are seeing things are not looking up for South Africa. So we can only pray and hope for the best there in South Africa, as well as the rest of the continent, because we are all in this together, outside of Tanzania, who just President Magufuli just does not care like that. And he's been saying that the numbers there are under control, and so you're welcome to visit Tanzania. All right. And so we move to Libya, where now we see that the internationally recognized government have recaptured Tripoli airport. This was under General Khalifa Haftar for the last couple of months. I think they had made their headway into Libya, and they had recaptured, because we know the government of the internationally recognized government, the GNU, that is backed by the United Nations, is positioned in Libya's capital there in Tripoli. And Khalifa Haftar had made a lot of gains into the capital there, but now we see that the international recognized government has recaptured much of Tripoli. Khalifa Haftar, he's based on the eastern part there in Benghazi, but he's been really working hard into gaining, space there in Tripoli, so that he can have a hold. If he can get a hold of Tripoli, then obviously he gets majority of he'll have more power. But the internationally recognized government there has been working hard, and what is really interesting is Russia has. Now it has been established, has been backing Mr. Khalifa Haftar, the renegade, their general. Russia has been backing, and a couple of weeks ago, a lot of mercenaries were seen to be going there in Libya from Russian mercenaries there, and Russia did not come out to refute these claims, because there are evidence, the videos that were captured showing Russian mercenaries going there, to Libya to back Khalifa Haftar. And we've seen Turkey also have come out to back the government of national unity there, that is recognized by the United Nations, and we see other players coming in. And so there's no hope of when and how this war in Libya will end, because of the different interests that are being represented, and these countries that are coming in, they're not coming in there because they love Libya so much and because they're rooting for peace in Libya and stability. They're coming in there, first of all, to fight their own proxy wars, because when you see Libya, Russia coming in, and they came in when Turkey came in, so they're there to stamp their powers, to stamp the sides that they're taking, the sides that they're leaning towards, and just to stamp the authority and to show, as much as you're coming in here, we also can come and do the same. So they're coming in just for a show of might and for other interests that they want in Libya. So they're not coming in there because they're really interested in finding a lasting peace solution for Libya. They're coming in there to represent their own interests, and that is the saddest part. And at the end of the day, Libyans get to innocent lives continue to be lost. Libya will never be the same again, and I don't know if there's a day we can be even hopeful anytime soon that Libya will go back to what it used to be. That might never happen, but even attaining a peaceful Libya, even just for a couple of weeks or time, or in the days to come, I think will be a daunting task, because of the different interests that are fighting for their own interest there. That are at play there in Libya. So even as much as the internationally recognized government has recaptured Tripoli, I'm sure right now the other players backed by Russia and other people, I'm sure they must be hatching a plan to see that they continue fighting. And it is something that the United Nations, African Union, has not been able to look into. I've not heard Cyril Ramaphosa talking about this matter in Libya, so I don't know what plans that African Union has. Remember, there were some talks that were held in Germany by Angela Merkel. She convened a talk there to try and find a solution for Libya, and then the talks were reverted to Africa, and I think it is which country? The Republic of Congo is supposed to be the one. These talks are supposed to be happening there, and I'm thinking, okay. But, so far, since Germany relinquished those talks back here in the continent, nothing much has been seen to be done. I don't know if it's because of the situation with the COVID-19, or I don't know what really has halted, these talks, because when they were happening, at least there was some peace, some semblance of a few peaceful days there. But right now, things have heightened, and innocent lives continue to get lost there in Libya, and the place is completely in shambles as we speak. So that is a situation that we continue to monitor, but I don't know if we'll ever see an end to what is happening right now in Libya, and if at all Libya will ever know peace in the days to come. There is something that we are looking forward to see how that will play out. So South Sudan, as I mentioned there, the cases have gone really up, but that is not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about this, what happened yesterday when a few people died there in South Sudan, and the Minister of Interior has appealed to the relatives of those who died in Wednesday's Sherikat shooting to remain calm, even as the government investigates the matter. Now, on Wednesday morning, an army officer related to President Salva Kiir and his bodyguards reportedly opened fire on unarmed civilians after a quarrel over land, killing 5 people. These army officials from South Sudan, they're just trigger happy. And this one that is related to President Salva Kiir, it's just the impunity of it all. You just think that you can just, mess up with a human being like that, because you can just shoot around because you know that you're closer to the president, and perhaps you don't expect anything to happen. So now a couple of people there in South Sudan lost their lives, and the shooting triggered protest, with demonstrators blocking roads and singing Kiir must go. South Sudan is already having other problems that it's dealing with. We talk about it here every day, so I will not even get into it. But this was quite unnecessary. And it's just here. Yesterday, as we were having our show yesterday, we had a news item from South Sudan about, army officials or security officials who are, protesting against a backlog of their salaries. And one of our viewers here let me know that they have not been paid for about 7 months now. So they were shooting in the air for 4 consecutive hours as protesting the delay in their salaries. It's not a delay. That is like, I don't know how to, because delay is like a couple of days, and but you will get it. 7 months, they have not been paid. So these are security officials with guns in their hands, and you've not paid them for 7 months, and now you see one of them here related to the president is killing civilians there over a dispute of land. I don't know what is happening there in South Sudan, and why is it that guns are even used as a way of protesting. I've never heard anywhere in the world where people will do that, but unfortunately that is what is happening there in South Sudan. And so I'm hoping that President Salva Kiir, and I've not heard him speak about these matters, even the protests that happened yesterday by those of course, the other day on Monday, by the security officials who were shooting in the air to protest the delay in the payments there. I did not hear President Salva Kiir come out. He is the commander-in-chief of the army there in South Sudan, the army, because, the way it has been constituted, it's not your normal army as maybe the Kenya Defense Forces or the Uganda Defense Forces, they don't have that. They have a militia, I think, mind because of the circumstances and how South Sudan has been. So I've always have been to the opinion that, these army officials, all the security agencies in South Sudan, they need like a workshop or just something to teach them how to be a disciplined force, to go through the normal army training or a disciplined force training, so that you understand your mandate as an army official of any country. Your first duty is to protect your country and the people of that country. But if you go on acting like you're a militia, which majority of them have been drawn from the militia groups, and you don't leave that militia mentality out there, and you still want to come here and serve South Sudan as a country, I think that is a ticking time bomb. And if things get out of hand, you'll just do what you know how to do best, just protest and shoot in the air. Because you don't have that disciplined force mentality, and that has to be entrenched in the army of South Sudan. And I know that will take time, but there should be a way that the army, the General Army of South Sudan, goes through a training that will embed in their minds, that when you serve as an army of a country, presidents will come and presidents will go. President Salva Kiir is not going to be the president of South Sudan for the rest of his life. Elections will come and other presidents will come, and when they do come, then you're supposed to pay allegiance to the sitting head of state at that time and the country, and the interest of the country must always come first. But how can they have that when 7 months later they've not been paid? So it's a lot of challenges there for President Salva Kiir. But I would have loved to see him come out and address these matters of, one, the security officials there protesting by shooting in the air for 4 good hours because they've not been paid. I would have loved for him to come out and speak about it and perhaps calm them down, because he is the head of the commander-in-chief there in South Sudan. Regardless of what else is happening, he's still the president of South Sudan right now. So he, I think, should come out and speak to his people there and just try to have them understand, as much as, this has happened. But you know what? The government still is thinking about you and is trying to find ways to take care of your salaries. But for 7 months, though, that's a really long time. And also, now this protest that happened, and one of his relatives now comes out to kill people, I think that is just adding salt to an already bad injury there. It's not helping matters there in South Sudan. So, I will not talk about the United States Embassy in Dar es Salaam, which has come out and said, the cases here are going up, and, the country is staring at a health crisis there in Tanzania. Of course, President Magufuli has said all is well, and you are all welcome to visit Tanzania if you're thinking of a place to tour. This will be the right time to go to Tanzania and visit, even as President Magufuli remains very secretive about the COVID situation there in the country. So the latest from Sudan, Sudanese protesters have been demonstrating. Of course, last year we saw how a huge number of people was killed, and it is now being said that about 130 protesters. You remember when they had barricaded the entrance towards the army unit there where the former President Omar al-Bashir was being held, and I lived there. So the civilian had refused to move. Remember, they protested weeks on end until some of the demands were met. So the army, it is said that the Janjaweed, the Sudan Rapid Force, which is the Janjaweed, is the one that carried out these killings. And of course, nothing much has been done in terms of the investigations. And you would understand why, because the second in command, of the army there in Sudan, the leader, what is his name? Hemeti, there is the head of this feared squad. And so he's part of the army officials that is now governing, Sudan. So there's no way he would agree to any investigation touching on him because he will be implicated. So the Janjaweed, or the rapid forces there, killed about 130 protesters. So yesterday they were marking, remember, the killings happened on the 3rd of June, remember, last year. And so yesterday they were marking 1 year after that. And yesterday the civilians took to the street to demand a swift action on, and to demand to know how far the progress of the investigation, which I don't think any is going on, owing to the factors that I mentioned there. And so Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok promised that justice will be done. But rights groups there say there has been little progress in regards to the investigation. I mean, there's no investigation going on. Mr. Hemeti is part of the army officials. Remember, the protesters' side had their numbers and the army side had their numbers. So right now, they are in a transitional government that will see the leadership of that country for the next 3 years before the country can go on to a new election there. They're working on their constitution. Remember, the constitution was Sudan right now does not have a constitution. They're working on a new one that will enable the changes that will come. There in Sudan, whatever the demonstrators and the protesting side and the civilian side wanted. Remember, the army side really wanted a country and a constitution that is anchored on Sharia law, like that one that was there during President Omar al-Bashir's time. But the protesters are saying, no, we want something more liberal. We want something more current. We want something that will, address the challenges that Sudan is facing on 21st century and moving forward, because we want Sudan back, into the 21st century. I remember when President Omar al-Bashir there was the president for nearly 30 years. A lot of things were not allowed to happen in that country, and he led through a Sharia law-based, rule there, and a lot of people did not like that. Even as much as a huge population, majority there is a Muslim country, but they still wanted a more liberal country, not that one entrenched so much into Sharia law that curtailed a lot of rights there. So they did not want that. So the army side was agitating for that, but the protester side said no. The civilian side said we want something more better. We don't want a Sharia law country here, constitution in this country. So they're working on the constitution there in Sudan, and we see now they're demanding justice be done. That will not happen. Mr. Hemeti is the second in command in the army, and it is his forces that went and killed these protesters. So you think that that he will agree for investigations, and it is the same thing, because remember, the international community, especially the U.S., has been demanding for the warrant of arrest on Bashir to be, respected, so that he's handed over to the ICC for the charges that he's having on what happened in Darfur. Remember, so many people lost their lives in Darfur, and Mr. Omar al-Bashir, being the head of state at that time, is held culpable of the people who died there in Darfur, and so they refused. I remember sometimes back last year, the protesters came out, or the government came out and said, we are actually thinking of handing over, Bashir to the ICC. But should Bashir go to the ICC? We know Bashir did not take a physical gun and shoot anybody in Darfur. But it is these generals, these army generals who ordered, who were there, who saw, who perhaps even took physical guns and killed people in Darfur. And they're now part of the new government. So you actually think that they will hand over, Bashir to the ICC? They can't, because that will implicate, they'll be taking themselves there. And so that is the dicey situation even the new leadership there in Sudan has to deal with. Kagame Bernard, thank you so much for joining and for watching. And if there's anything happening there outside of Africa, the show is Diaspora Dispatches, where we get to look at the news-making headlines in the continent. So thank you so much that you found time to watch, and you think the show is great. Thank you. All right. And so still in Sudan, and the United Nations Security Council on Wednesday unanimously adopted two resolutions to create a mission in Sudan to support the country's political transition and extend the mandate of peacekeepers in Darfur. Remember, a couple of days ago, the government of Sudan had asked that the AU and the UN mission there should not end, because remember they were supposed to leave sometimes in this year because their mandate is over. They are supposed to be there for 12 months, but they said we need more help because peace and security has not completely been restored, especially in the Darfur region there. So they're saying we still need your help, so don't take these peacekeepers away. And so now we see the United Nations Security Council on Wednesday unanimously adopted two resolutions to create a mission in Sudan to keep supporting that country there for the next 12 months. But also, I think I think that would be good for the country, I guess. And the mission was established for an initial period of 12 months. And so the resolution right now asks Secretary General Antonio Guterres to quickly name an envoy to head up the new mission. I don't know, because this new draft was drafted by Britain and Germany. All right. So the resolution on the new United Nations Integrated Transition Assistance Mission. So this is a new mission for Sudan, outside of that which was there. So this is a new mission, and the draft, it was drafted by Britain and Germany. So now, because Omar al-Bashir is not there, of course, Sudan is trying to open itself for the rest of the world there, and it has been working very hard to be removed in that list of the countries that are supporting terrorism across the world. I think we've talked about that so much, and it has not been very successful. And I think the reason as to why, especially the US, wants Sudan to hand over Omar al-Bashir to the ICC, which Sudan said, part of the leadership said it will, sometimes back last year. I doubt they'll be able to do that because the military side will not agree, because we talked about that. I don't want to get into that. But also, there seems to be a new appetite for Sudan, and we see a lot of countries from the Western world now having interest in Sudan there, to come in there. It's very interesting. And we know the military side of the leadership of Sudan has a backing of, I think, the UAE, the Arab countries there, and because they represent their interests and they protect their interest in Sudan. Remember, Omar al-Bashir faced a lot of sanctions, so it is a lot of countries in the Arab world that have been supporting it. But when you see the war, the proxy war that is even went on in Sudan, that eventually supported the toppling of Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir, you see it's a lot of proxy wars between the UAE and the rest of the Arab world. Remember Qatar also, because they don't get along very well with Saudi Arabia and all that. So they have been supporting, they've been shifting their support there in Sudan. So the military side has a lot of backing from the Arab countries there, especially the UAE and Saudi Arabia there. They support the military side. And this other side, the civilian side, they have backings from the Western world, So the military side that wanted to introduce Sharia law and all that in the constitution, you would understand where that perhaps came from. And now the civilian side, which is backed by the Western world, you can see why they wanted a more liberal constitution. So because of the people that are backing them there. And yes, it's very complicated. Proxy wars there in Sudan. But you see now a lot of interest have been developing an appetite to come into Sudan, because it's a very vital, place for development. A lot of things stalled because of the sanctions that have been brought about during the nearly 30 years rule of President Omar al-Bashir. Okay, that's a lot of history. We'll talk about the rest next time. Zimbabwe culture, you're saying, Dr. Matanga, how are you? He's not here. My name is Miriam Ogutu, but thank you so much for joining. But I'll pass your regards, and he is fine. He shall be coming, I think, at 2. I think I should let you know about this before I leave, because my time is nearly up. But before I leave, this journalist that was killed in Cameroon, he's from the Anglophone region there. And remember, he was arrested 300 days incommunicado in a court, in a martial court in Yaoundé. How do you put a journalist in a martial court? That is meant for the military in Yaoundé. So he died after 300 days of being held. He died there, and there are reports that say that he was tortured before he died. So we see the union journalist there in Cameroon coming out and condemning this. I'd like to see how the Western world will respond to this, because President Paul Biya is not in very good books there, and because of the things that is happening and the crisis in the Anglophone region there in Cameroon, who have been calling and wanting to secede and form their own Anglophone country. And of course, Paul Biya, that is something that is not even in his plans. Last year, he held a national dialogue. That was a mockery of a dialogue. You cannot dialogue by yourself and call that a national dialogue, because that is essentially what happened. But I'll not get into the details of it. So I wanted to tell you about a show that will be coming up at 2 p.m. With Dr. Matsanga. Let me just see the name of it, if our, production can put that on screen for us, so that we can see at 2 p.m. we have this frontline security show that will be hosted by Dr. David Matsanga himself, and the guest will be retired Major Bijiwe, Mwenda Bijiwe there, and they'll be looking at, did IEBC sell voters' names to Third Way Alliance Party, and is Third Way Alliance Party George Soros a vehicle in regime change in Kenya, and also who paid for Ekuru Aukot. You remember Ekuru Aukot, the Third Way Alliance party leader there, got some signatures and for the Punguza Mizigo initiative that was defeated in a lot of counties in this Kenya. So it appears there's more to the story, and when you join Dr. Matsanga at 2 p.m, he'll let you know what's really cooking. So thank you so much. My name is Miriam Ogoto. It has been a pleasure to have you this afternoon. I'll see you here tomorrow at 9 a.m. for Daytime Express. Bye-bye for now.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.